This episode contains discussions around mental health and brief mentions of PTSD, past trauma, and suicide. If you or someone you know needs help, please use the resources provided. You are not alone. Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Hello, listeners of Steering Change. My name is Kelsey Hipkin, and welcome to Part 4 of our Road to Wellness series. For those who've been with us from the start of this journey, you've heard from subject matter experts and commercial transportation professionals on everything from technology to keep you safe in the workplace, health and diet tips and tricks for behind the wheel, and the importance of sleep and fatigue management. Today, we will explore the wellness of the mind. I am joined by Kris Marks and once again by Doug Walton, AMTA's Senior Advisor at Member Solutions. Christopher, Doug, welcome.
Hey, Kelsey. Hello.
To start, we'll do some quick introductions. Christopher, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Kris Marks. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Vive Mental Health. And I should start off by saying I was not always a mental health guy. So this has been a wonderful journey to kind of get to this point, to have this company and do the work that I'm passionate about. My background actually is in the trades. I was a journeyman machinist for 13 years, proud Red Seal, love the trades. And COVID became a catalyst for a new path in my career, and I took a chance to kind of pursue something that I was very passionate about, something I'd been working on personally, very quietly for many years, and it's worked out really well. So I have the privilege of speaking about mental health, men's mental health, workplaces, doing lots of community stuff, classroom comedy. If your listeners can't see me, I got 4 guitars hanging on the wall behind me, so I work in a lot of my personal passions like music and into the work that I do. And yeah, it's just a privilege to be here. I really appreciate that you've opened up this space and that you have access to these conversations. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Kris. We love the trades here, obviously, and we're hoping that commercial drivers can get that red seal one day soon as well. Doug, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure can, Kelsey. Thanks. Doug Walton, Senior Advisor of our Member Solutions team here at the AMTA. I've been in the trucking industry for about 27 years. I started as a driver in the late 90s, came out of the truck, moved into an operations role in about 2000, and never looked back. And found myself here at the AMTA where I get an opportunity to give back to the industry, meet with our members, and help them find solutions to their problems and offer them help where they need it. And it's been a great journey for me, and I'm proud to be here having this conversation with the both of you.
And I am thrilled to have the both of you here as well. So thank you so much. I am going to let Doug take it from here.
Thanks, Kelsey. Christopher, just wanted to start off the interview by just expressing my gratitude to you, my friend. I've had the privilege of learning more about you and the incredible work that you do. And I must say, you are truly an inspiration. And I'm so thankful that you're here with us today. In a conversation you and I had not too long ago, you opened up about your own struggles with mental health starting at a young age. But despite those challenges, you found the strength to push through and overcome them. And, you made it through school. You talked about graduating from NAIT at, the top of your class, went on to become a Red Seal journeyman machinist, which is a remarkable achievement. And today you're the founder and CEO of Vive Mental Health and a passionate advocate for mental health. And I just want to celebrate that and love for you to share a little bit more about your story and how you got to where you are in this point in your life.
Thanks, Doug. I really appreciate that. It's not easy to make me blush, but you're coming close, my friend.
Doug has a gift for that.
Yeah, right. No, it's I come about this work very honestly. It is a privilege to be offered space to share a bit about my story and share my professional expertise and just to connect with people. You and I had a great, candid conversation. It's never lost on me what a gift and a privilege that is. So yeah, it's been my life has been quite a journey. I'll give you the Coles notes. I'll try to keep it concise. But when I was 10 years old, my parents divorced. I'm the oldest of 3. I have a younger brother and a younger half sister. But that was kind of my first experience, like traumatic experience as a kid. It was not a good divorce for my parents. They were quite young. And, to be frank, it was ugly. And, looking back, I know that they were doing the best that they could and they were just trying and hoping that, us kids were managing okay, but really there was a lot of support in that area. We were just kind of pushing through. So it took a toll on the relationship with my family and kind of the rest of my upbringing and my formative years. So in high school, we moved. I was living with my dad and his new wife, and we moved to Sherwood Park, which is a satellite community outside of Edmonton. For a 14-year-old, it's like moving to Florida. Like I left all my friends behind and everything. So
Right.
having to start over was with those connections and fostering new friendships was challenging. But like I'm a pretty outgoing guy. Played hockey. Grew up playing hockey my whole life, and I thought, it won't be so bad. So I started to make some friends, and there was an incident that happened after school. I kind of met some kids who were trying out for the same team as I was, and we didn't know each other, and we're kind of testing each other out. We snuck back into the school, just kind of horsing around with basketballs and stuff. And what kind of started off as what we used to call like boys being boys, just it escalated into a pretty serious assault, I guess. And that moment changed my life. Years and years later, when I was 31, I'm 42 now, I was diagnosed with PTSD from the effects of that single incident. And, the way that I was raised, Doug, my dad was my hockey coach. I really looked up to him. He was tenured at his job. He never missed a day of work. He was tough, tough love, bootstraps kind of guy. So I had a lot of resilience, and I kind of leaned inward, hoping that I could kind of tough through what I was experiencing. But what happened to me was it disrupted my sleep. So I started to get night terrors as a teen. For those of you who don't know kind of the difference between a nightmare and a night terror, nightmare you kind of wake up from and you're like, oh gosh, that was awful, and it starts to fade away and you go about your day. Maybe you're a bit tired. And a night terror is a very, very different experience. And the effects of waking up from that are like being covered in molasses with those feelings and emotions. So it affects, my mood and my outward persona all day. I developed sleep anxiety, so I would be anxious about going to sleep for fear of having these terrors. So I wouldn't sleep for days on end. So anyway, it took its toll on my home life. I kind of got unceremoniously exited from my home a couple weeks after high school graduation. Didn't have a lot of life skills at that time, or money, or anything. But I spent the next 2 years as an 18, 19-year-old. The first one of my friends with his own place. You can imagine how much fun we had, and we did. But, I was just winging it. And, this was back in 2002. I came home from whatever job I was working at the time to an extra lock on my door. And back when you could do that. So they had evicted me, hadn't paid rent. And that was the first night that I slept outdoors. So, I was back in the rough part of Edmonton, siloed from my friends, obviously estranged from my parents. And no one really knew what I was going through. I had nothing, no car, no money, no ID or anything like that. So I lived unhoused for a few months, which was really scary for a young guy who kind of came from like a middle class upbringing and, played hockey and all that stuff to being truly homeless. So all of these life events kind of compounded on each other. And I survived a suicide attempt at that time. And that moment sort of became a catalyst for, am I going this way or the other way? And however I managed it, I found the courage to, call up a friend, and I lied. I said, my roommate buggered off, and, can I stay with you and your parents for a little bit? He was living at home, and I kind of got back on my feet and started to reconcile with my family too. And I didn't tell them anything. Nobody knew about what happened in high school. Nobody knew about the sleep thing. And I called my dad. I said, hey, I'm looking to kind of get my life together. I was 24. He was living in Grand Prairie. And at first he said, no, I don't want any part of it. Then he called back and he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He's like, you would leave all your friends and stuff, come move up here. I'm like, yeah. Like nobody moves to Grand Prairie to change their life. But and shout out to Grand Prairie. Like it was the most profound 2 years of my life. I started my trade up there. I got apprenticed by a guy he played hockey with, and started my career in machining, being an artsy kid playing music and writing poems that turned into songs. Machining was it scratched a lot of itches because I like working with my hands, but it was very creative, high precision trade. So,
Yeah.
and my best friend was in NAIT with me, 3 of those 4 years. So I made a go of it and did well in school. Like I was a straight A student until high school. So I was smart and kind of embraced machining. But as my 20s went on into my early 30s, the night terrors were worse and they affected my relationships, my work for sure. I look back and, I called in sick to work a lot and I lied. I became that flaky employee who wasn't reliable, but I didn't want to tell them that, I'm scared to go to sleep. I haven't slept in 2.5 days. So I was kind of living two lives. Like I wasn't being really authentic with what I was experiencing. Again, just trying to push through and it came to a head. So I decided to ask for help and I opened up the phone book. If you remember phone books, those were a thing.
Yeah.
And so, found a guy who was doing pro bono counseling once a week. So I made an appointment with him and canceled it. And then I made another appointment. I canceled that one too. I did that 2 more times until I got the courage to actually show up. So he was the first person that I ever told, the long version of that story to, who knew my truth. The first person. I was quite emotional. He was quite emotional. And he looked at me and said, "Kris, do you know what I do the other 6 days of the week?" I said, "I have no idea." And he says, "I work at the Edmonton Max prison. And the story that you just told me, the experiences that you've been through, I've heard before, but I've heard it from inmates who end up with me." And he said, "You need to know how remarkable it is that you were able to, live a fairly quote unquote normal life. You got a trade, you had a healthy career, you had healthy relationships by and large." He said, that is really something. And that was the first time that I ever had context to what I just like pushed through and get up every day and you just do what you got to do. And that was the first time I think I felt a little proud of myself. So it was, my voice just got a little tight there. It was a special moment that really drove me to do the work and reconcile with my friends and family. And my time in the trades was great, but I struggled a little bit and I started advocating just kind of on my own behalf through Twitter, actually, Twitter and other social media, talking about, going to therapy for the first time, being a guy, trades guy, going to therapy, what that was like, and just talking about things that I'd healed from over the years. And it really resonated with a lot of people. And I'd spend my evening, my DMs were full of, just strangers who were like, "Hey, I'm kind of going through this. What would you recommend?" And I really cared about all these people. So I decided that, this is something that I want to pursue. And 3.5 years later, after I founded Vive, I didn't really know what it was going to be. I love to teach. I used to teach music. So I'm like, I want to teach, mental health. And I love to speak. So I want to do keynotes and inspire people. So it just snowballed into opportunities that I kept saying yes to, Doug. And
Awesome.
and here we are. So yeah, I'm quite privileged, quite grateful. And it's been a ride.
I bet. Well, what an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Kelsey mentioned earlier, this is part 4 of our Road to Wellness series. And I think this discussion that we're going to have today is probably one of the most important ones of the series. And it's really going to help raise awareness, or I hope it will. So, I guess with that in mind, let's dive in, because I know there's a lot of important ground to cover. So to start off, we know we hear the term mental health a lot, but what is mental health? From your perspective, what does it mean, and how would you, I guess, define it?
That is the best question to ask first. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. Believe me, like I was one who perpetuated them. And, mental health by definition is just your state of mental well-being and kind of your ability to cope with challenges. And it's really in the most fundamental way, it's just inventory of how you are. We've all worked in places, you got to do inventory. It's just information about yourself so that you are kind of empowered with enough info to like make adjustments or to, take care of something. Or so mental health isn't, we used to equate it with mental illness, and that was where the stigma kind of grew. You talk about mental health and you think, oh, somebody's mentally unstable or they're crazy. And, those are terms that we're trying to kind of phase out because they're a bit outdated with what we know now. So when you think about health is health, right? So You ask somebody like, how are you feeling lately? Maybe somebody's gone through surgery or something. You're going to ask how they're doing. They're talking about their physical health, and your mental health is just the same thing. Like, how are you? It's kind of the micro question. What's your state right now? Like me and you talking right now. How have you been? Is kind of like the mean average of like how you've been.
Checking in kind of thing.
Just checking in. So yeah, mental
Yeah.
health. I mean, it's a pretty accessible term that just has carried a lot of stigma traditionally, but it's just how you're doing, like your personal inventory. And I can share one thing that I do every morning. I didn't always do this, but I found it to be really helpful. It's just an exercise called nose to toes. So I wake up in the morning, hopefully before I look at my phone or whatever, I just swing my legs off the bed, and I just sit there on the edge of the bed and kind of imagine like a red laser beam kind of scanning the front of my body. And I go over like, I'm 42, so I'm like, did I pull something while I was sleeping? Because that's a thing. Am I tired? And how's my physical state? And then at the same time, I let my mind kind of wander. What's the first thing I think of? Like, do I have something I got to do today? Am I anxious about a meeting, or am I worried about something? So I just take all that information and I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling kind of off today. Maybe I'll grab like a nicer coffee than McDonald's or something, give myself some more time to have a 5-minute extra shower. So it's just information to kind of let me make adjustments so my day's better.
That allows you to honor what you're going through that day and to serve your body what it needs, right? When you do that scan ahead, that's a really good idea. So when you get onto the conversation of mental health, why do you think people get so uncomfortable discussing it? Like, whether the conversation's happening, with your coworkers at work, or whether it's happening at the dinner table with your family, why is it hard for people to open up or even just have those discussions?
Yeah, good question. There's two ways that I kind of want to answer that. One is like the social aspect of mental health. So let's say someone comes to you with something very heavy and you're like, holy smokes, like I'm going to try and be there. And that makes you uncomfortable because you're like, I've never experienced that before. Like, I don't even know how to support this person. So there's that self-reflection in the social sense. And then there's also, when you think of mental health, you're like, oh, great, now I have to look inward. And one of our coping mechanisms as humans is to project. So the less that we can internalize, kind of the easier it is to navigate the world. Our focus is outward. And when we're sort of asked to look inside, it's honestly, we don't have a lot of practice. I sure didn't. I wasn't a real reflective guy. And it's funny though, I look back and I as an artsy kid, I used to write songs. I still write songs. And that was sort of my outlet. So in a way, I was reflecting and just like getting it out and projecting it. And that was really cathartic for me. But I think by and large, mental health feels uncomfortable because we kind of think of it as like, oh, you're asking me to look inward. And I've heard rumblings from the basement or, so we're kind of the fear of the unknown, what's going to crop up is a big deterrent. And the easiest thing to do is to not. So
Right.
It takes intention and effort to think about your mental health. It takes a bit of work. That's true.
Do you think there's a difference between how men and women process that, or how they have those discussions? Or
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And that's why we have conversations about men's mental health. And we could talk about mental health universally. There's a lot of things that no matter what gender you are, will apply to that mental health conversation. But traditionally, and when you got to paint with a broad brush, and there's safe places to do this with, men traditionally don't have a lot of practice expressing internal feelings. And I go back to that. I don't know if you're a sports fan, but Allen Iverson was in a press conference a few years ago, and one of the reporters was bugging him about how he was acting in practice. We're talking about practice, and it makes me laugh. Like, Iverson's just a character, but what he's saying is like, you know what? That's our time to kind of fumble around and figure it out. And like, what are you doing criticizing the way I practice?
Right.
And I really related that to kind of how, men especially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the trucker workforce is still kind of male dominated. And
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, this part's relevant, but honestly, like, don't beat yourself up if you don't know how to find your words or express yourself. That's what I did. And it didn't serve me well. Like, there's nothing anybody can say to me that I haven't said 6 inches from a mirror. So, but learning some self-compassion to be like, okay, I got to figure it out. Kind of in tangent with that, I run a program called Instrumental Health. It's a therapeutic music program. And it's different than music therapy. What we do it in addiction recovery with men. I come in with a bunch of instruments and some video stuff. And big part of it is we study music. So when I couldn't figure out how I was feeling, I'd crank like Pearl Jam or something, or like put on like something from Master of Puppets, and I'd let James Hetfield tell the world how I feel. Yeah. But it was so powerful. And when I kind of opened that up to guys and I said, like, you don't always have to know the words. And I know some people are maybe partners or parents are telling you, like, just tell me how you feel. Like, you need to be more open. It's hard and it puts you on the defensive. So I was that kid who used to make mix CDs for girls I liked, or tell my parents, like, hey, listen to this song. And like, it really helped open up a branch of conversation that's really important. So you don't always have to find them yourself. You can use people who are saying it the way that you feel it and say, this is what I mean. Yeah. And it could be a great way to spark those conversations.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm a little bit of a musician, and I find so much.
You're a humble guy, Doug.
When you sit down at a piano and you've had a rough day, and you can just play a bit of a tune, and all your troubles kind of melt away during that period of time. For me, anyway, awesome. Right? And so that's awesome. But in previous episodes of our Road to Wellness, we learned a little bit about chronic health issues related to commercial driving, and especially for the long haul drivers. And I've come to learn that there's another issue which could have an even greater impact on our health, and that is loneliness. And from your perspective, how does loneliness impact our physical health, our mental health, and how important really is that human connection? Because these drivers are out on the road. They don't see anybody but the gas station attendant when they get their coffee, or their shipper receiver, who really probably doesn't give them a whole lot of time when they're unloading anyway. So walk me through what you feel from your perspective, how loneliness is impacting our lives.
A lot, if not tops. Loneliness, like disconnection, is kind of how we frame it in mental health. But terms like loneliness and being siloed, all those themes contribute, or is one of the top factors to poor mental health. Fundamentally, Doug, like, we're social beings, right? So, when I was growing up, they were talking about the necessities of life, and connection was on that list, human connection. And we know how hard it is to survive as an individual, and we can broaden that conversation with how fractured society has become, and people looking out for themselves. But loneliness it can be really hard to navigate, and it's not like you can just cure it by going to somebody's house, walking into their kitchen and be like, hey friends, like, it's you could try, maybe in Nova Scotia, but it's a difficult thing to navigate, especially when that is your lifestyle intersected with your career, right? So if you're listening to this and you're on the road, first of all, thank you. But second, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, that's a real challenge, and that is not something that's easy to navigate and cope with. So be kind to yourself. If you're feeling lonely and kind of stuffing that down, like, whatever, this is my job. You are still experiencing the world as a human being, and right. Being alone is really tough. So we know that mental health affects our physiological health. They're interconnected. So we have basically 3 pillars of a health. We have mental, emotional, and physical, and all of them are intersected. If you don't believe me, and I asked you to come and do a keynote in front of 500 people, pulled you on stage right now, imagine the feeling in your gut if you're not a speaker, right? So we have a physiological response to things like loneliness. And the other thing that happens when we are alone is that we ruminate, and our brain is like, hey, there's no distractions, we should talk. And going back to how uncomfortable that can be, and now your thoughts are kind of dictating your internal dialogue. It could be really off-putting. Some things could crop up. You're like, I didn't want to think about that. And your brain's like, well, we got time. And it can feel like you don't really have control over some of those thoughts. And that can escalate into anxiety, from loneliness as well. So there's a lot of pathways that could take, but I think we're going to talk about maybe ways that we can overcome loneliness as well. I think that's
Yeah, for sure.
we want to talk about some tangible things we can do too, but that's just to kind of acknowledge the experience of those who are on the road for long periods and how tough it can be.
Well, I heard a stat the other day, and this was prior to COVID. They mentioned that in the United States, 30% of the people don't know who their neighbors are, right? So we're not getting out, we're not socializing, and that's having a huge impact on how we function as a society, is what they were saying. But for me,
yes,
I feel incredibly blessed because I have a close-knit group of friends that I can share anything with. Like these 6 guys, I ride bike with, we've known each other for over a decade. So whenever I'm facing a challenge, I know I can call them anytime, and they're there for me, without judgment. And I recognize that this kind of support system is really rare. And I often reflect on the days when I was driving. I went through a divorce and separation and all that stuff, all those challenges, being on the road. You jump in the truck, you turn the key, and you're driving miles and miles away from your problems at home. There's no one to talk to. You're staring out of the windshield of the truck, and you're just like, I just want to turn around and go back and try to fix what's going wrong, and I can't because I have this timeline. And when I think about those days, I think I would never have the support system, or it would be very, very difficult for me to have the friends that I have today, that support system. And then it got me thinking, how do we help our professional drivers who are out there that are going through that kind of stuff? Like, how do we give them that avenue or give them opportunity for meaningful connections with others while they're out on the road so that they're not feeling so alone? And I know there's social media and there's all that other stuff, but they can't be on their phones while they're driving,
Right.
So there's a lot of those challenges, right? So I was hoping that you could share some of your thoughts as to how do we get through some of those challenges, and what can we offer our professionals in the industry?
Well, I think it's powerful that you kind of shared your own experience, Doug, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. I was never a trucker, but what I was a remote worker. So I worked up in camp, northern Alberta for 21 on, 7 off, or whatever it was, for a few periods. So I mentioned that because the experience of loneliness and isolation and being siloed kind of transcends like the experience itself. So whether it's a trucker or remote oil and gas or a surveyor who's got to go, who knows? It's kind of the same experience. And how do you foster connection when you have all these barriers? Kelsey was nice enough to send me these questions a few hours ago, and this one gave me a lot of pause. And I'm like, I really want to provide something of value here. So I put some thought into it. And I think that, first and foremost, the relationships that we need, the support group that you've built, Doug, that starts at home. So it's an investment, and we only have so much time when we're not on the road and you're at home doing life and family, and but really nurturing those relationships when you can and being intentional about why you're doing it. So expressing to, a trusted friend or whatever to say, hey, like I really appreciate you. I need you in my life. I know I'm gone a lot. I want to talk to you about it so that we can stay connected while I'm gone, because, obviously I can't be over every weekend having drinks or something, but, could I give you a call? I know Tuesdays you're at the gym, you got a long drive home. What if I gave you a call every other Tuesday and we just chatted while I'm out? And so nurturing those relationships, making sure they're strong before you go, and just kind of saying, hey, my lifestyle, I need to keep some connection. Like, can you work with me to kind of keep that going? And the right friends, and that will be like, oh, sure. It's amazing how eager people are to support each other, even if they're not like a great, like, lifelong friend. People who just care, they're excited to kind of step up for you and be like, oh yeah, no, I can appreciate like life on the road. That must be tough. Yeah, let's figure something out. So having that conversation is easier said than done, but you only fail when you fail to try. So never hurts to bring it up. You said you can't like text, or I'm not sure even if you can make a phone call while you're driving and I get to listen to the radio and stuff. But my buddy Kirk, so back in my 1819 era, he was about 17. We used to party a lot together. And he ended up, we were about like 22. And out of nowhere, he's like, I'm going to be a trucker. And off he went. And I'd see him every once in a while, and he'd tell these stories. Like, he's just a kid, right? And like a bit of a wild child. And he'd be like, yeah, my truck broke down on a nice road, and like the bearings red hot, wheel bearings all seized. You just got to figure it out. Like, there's no one to call. So he was talking like, and these stories were wild. And I'm like, dude, like, how do you just know how to? He's like, well, I didn't, but I had to figure it out, or I would have froze.
Yeah.
And I never forgot his stories, but he was always eager to kind of share that when he got back, and we kept in touch. And times have changed. We have social media and stuff now, but I think really laying the groundwork before you head out on the road is really important. So if you can kind of set the stage and have something to look forward to. You gotta Zoom chat with some buddies on a Friday night. You're overnighting in a hotel or in the truck. You can think about that while you're on the road. And be
That's
like,
a great
okay,
idea. Yeah.
two more days, and I get to see my buddies, and they're all excited to get you up on, put you up in the garage or whatever on the TV. Different ideas like that. And something else I thought of today is, and I don't know if this exists, Doug, but there's got to be some groups for like remote traveling workers or truckers in particular, where maybe there's a forum on Facebook or Instagram or something where you're like, hey, I'm heading to Houston, looking to hop on this channel. Let's have a chat between these. Like, I don't know what that would look like, but just to get creative with wherever you're going, you can kind of connect with people there. And the last tip, Kirk told me, he's like, I always listen to the radio, whatever town I'm driving through, and I'll call into the radio shows. And he'll be like, hey, I'm just passing through. Like, your welcome sign is a little crooked, but can I request a song or whatever? And he loved it. He just thought it was great. He got to talk to somebody on the phone for a minute, and he'd do the same route a few times, and they'd remember him. So he was Kirk the Trucker on a couple of radio shows, and stuff like that. So get creative. And I know it's tough to kind of be in your own mind. It wants to wander sometimes to not so great places, but I want to mention that it's also a real good opportunity to do some work. And like, you're listening to a podcast right now, proud of you. Like, it's awesome. I wasn't always a podcast guy, but it's nice to hear another human voice kind of telling stories or just connecting with you. So whatever you can do, you got to be intentional, and connection doesn't always come to you, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, that's great advice. And, it is still human connection. Even if you are calling into that radio station requesting that song, it is still some form of connection. And
Absolutely.
I think that's awesome. So moving on to, I guess, from an employer's perspective, as you know, supporting our employees is crucial. And one valuable resource is like employee assistance programs and stuff. While I believe in their effectiveness, I wonder, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I feel that sometimes EAP programs run the risk of showing up a bit too late. And what I mean by that is, if your frontline staff or your dispatchers, office managers, or others aren't trained on recognizing when a colleague is struggling, or even like to your point earlier, how to handle a team member when they kind of spill it all out to you and say, this is what I'm going through, remove the chairs, bring in the couch, and I'm going to tell you my life story. And here's, so that also takes a special person to be able to respond appropriately to that. So I guess where I'm going is, besides just handing out the EAP pamphlets, employee assistance pamphlets, when you hear someone, that's having a difficult time, where does mental health first aid come into this, training for your staff? Like, I know you work with employers all the time. Like,
yeah.
Where would you go with a company to say, here, this is how you need to be supporting, and how would you train their frontline staff to recognize when someone's going through some stuff?
That's a great question. I'm going to give you a lot of credit for even asking it, because the easy thing to do is to say, we have an EAP. We do one-to-ones, twice a year. Here's your Christmas bonus or whatever, and say that's enough. So Doug, I give you a lot of credit for even asking if it's enough or if you can do more. That mentality is really appreciated. But I'm going to push back on one thing that you said very, very gently. You mentioned that it takes a special person to kind of navigate sensitive or difficult conversations. I disagree. I think it just takes an empowered, confident person who's kind of had a little bit of time to practice. I think anybody can be supportive as long as you understand that you only have to support within your means, and whatever you don't know, say you don't know, and then all you have to do is say, let's we and us. I don't know. Let's figure it out. I don't know. We should go talk to so-and-so, and just be the liaison. So you both learn together and you just carry on that support. So segue into the training aspect, it takes a little bit of intentional education on what that looks like, and to be comfortable so that you're kind of ready for anything. That's when I feel the most confident. When I was apprenticing as a machinist, not confident running these lathes and mills, and you kind of have to do a little bit of work, and then you're like, okay, I got the hang of this. It's just like anything else. So mental health first aid, I was trained by the Canadian Mental Health Association. The Mental Health Commission in Canada has a great mental health first aid program. And what it does is it's kind of a top-down view, sort of a high-level understanding of mental health, navigating some of those critical challenges, recognizing signs and symptoms. Really good for that. The only barrier with that is that it's hard to apply and kind of adjust that for different workplaces. So, what Vive does with different companies is really hone in on reprioritizing what challenges might be applicable to that particular work environment or that particular demographic. Because, if people are on the road all the time, it's really tough to check in and kind of get a sense of how they are, or it gets bottled up, Doug, and then they pull a couch into your office and you're like, holy smokes, like it's all coming out at once. So those logistics are really important to kind of strategize for. So as an employer, you got to look in the mirror and be like, okay, this is our work environment. This is our workplace culture. Do we have a lot of old school guys here who are kind of pushing back on quote unquote touchy feely stuff? And I'm using, just casual language, but that's the realistic side of it, right? So it really has to come from like a human level. And one thing that I try to empower leaders with, and you don't have to be a mental health guy, but at the start of this podcast, I kind of went first and I shared, a personal story. Now, it was a pretty deep story, maybe a little bit heavy, but I did volunteer and I said, you know what, I'll go first. So I modeled kind of the behavior to say that, like, hey, I'm okay. And whether or not you respect me or you see me as a peer or whatever, but at least I was willing to kind of go, okay, I'll go first. And that can help break the ice.
Right.
So I'm not saying that you got to share your life story or, the ins and outs of a divorce or something. My psychologist gave me some great advice. And when I started doing public speaking, she said, don't talk about things you haven't healed from. And I thought that was really powerful. And it encouraged me to kind of heal from the things that I did want to talk about. But it reminded me that, like, hey, you don't have to open up Pandora's box to support somebody or to create that safe space for conversations to happen. But if you're doing a debrief after a long run, or you're in the shop before everybody heads out, make it part of your safety talk. It is a health and safety issue, by the way, because when I haven't slept for 3 days, framing it that way kind of gives it a soft landing. You're like, hey, I'm just going to do it like a check-in.
And that's important with our industry, because being fit for duty, we are driving down the road with 80,000 pounds of freight or more. And, if we're not really fit for duty, if we're just walking in and we got stuff going on and our mind traffic is preventing us from being safe on the road, the dispatcher behind that window reaching back, grabbing the keys and just saying, okay, have a great trip, and not recognizing that there might be an issue with that person. They're heading out on the road, again, dealing with what they're dealing with, not paying attention to the job at hand, which is keeping between the lines. And that's where things can really go wrong. So to your point, having the ability to have that safe space, no matter who you are, and you don't have to be the senior leader of that company to help the person beside you, right? And you to your point, you don't need to be professionally trained to sit, and I've heard the term sit in mud with someone else, right? Yep. And just maybe you're just lending that ear. Maybe you don't have the answers that they need, but you're just listening and then giving them that guidance. That can make a big difference. So yes, being prepared for the road and making sure that you are fit for duty is so important. And I just want to make sure that companies out there listening to the podcast understand that the open door policies, your drivers are your number one resource in that. It's not the truck up against the fence. It's not the trailer in the yard. It's not the load or the rates that you're getting paid. That all doesn't matter unless that driver's in the seat healthy and they're there enjoying the work they're doing, and they're supported at every level, whether it's for their physical health or mental health. So yeah, I just great points, and I just wanted to share that.
No, that's great framing, and I'll even add that it's one thing to kind of talk about it broadly on a podcast, but if you really want to know what that looks like, it's easier than it probably sounds in your mind right now. And a driver would just want to know what that looks like. If I walk into your office and I close the door behind me and I say, hey, do you got a minute? That's what that looks like. And your ability to kind of be prepared for that can make all the difference. And even if you're not in senior leadership, even if it's a coworker, colleague, just to be able to express like, hey, I really care about you. Yeah, I got a minute. One of the mindsets that we use is called, do you want to be hugged, heard, or helped? Now, I'm not saying go around like hug everybody, but
one arm, just with one arm.
Yeah, right. Just something over the shoulder. But if, what that does is that, somebody who's out of sorts is kind of dealing with a challenge, or they're really not well, it could be hard for them to come up with an answer to the question, what do you need? Because you're kind of putting all that emotional labor on them. So to give them like quick 3 options, like, do you want me to just sit and like hear you out? Do you want me to hear you out and then we're going to try and find a solution? Or do you just want to like grab a coffee and like get out of here? Giving them, clear options can really diffuse, an uncomfortable situation. You don't have to be a mental health expert. You just have to be human. And being human means you get to be imperfect. So you don't have to do it right. You just have to own that, like, you care, and that whatever you don't know, let's go find out. We should go ask somebody and be their liaison. So relax. You're a great mental health supporter, whether you know it or not. You just have to be fundamentally human, and you just have to give a what. And I think we all do.
Well, and I got a great example of that. I was at a football game with my son on a Saturday afternoon, and I got a call from one of my drivers. He's like, Doug, I was online and I was looking at some social media posts of another team member, and they were writing some really dark stuff, and I'm really worried about them. And I don't know if I should reach out, but I just wanted to let you know that I think we should be worried about this person. And I thought, well, wow, that's where it all started, right? And that's where it needs to start. Wow. Is people paying attention to what others are going through. So I took a minute and went to the truck. I phoned dispatch, got the person's number, and I phoned and said, hey, we're just checking in. We just wanted to see how you're doing, right? And he immediately started to cry and just shared, I'm in a really dark space, and I'm sorry. Anyway, we got there in time, and I think that we got him the support that he needed, and it was all the difference for him. And it was it was really something that I will always take away and go, that if it wasn't for that other person caring for someone else and recognizing that there was someone needed some intervention, where could that have gone, right? And so we're so blessed to have people like that. And I think you just got to continue to surround ourselves with people like that in our lives. But anyway, I know we could talk about this forever. I could have this conversation for many hours with you, Christopher, but I just wanted to thank you for being here. I know we unpacked a lot. Appreciate you being here. So I'm going to send it back over to Kelsey for some final thoughts and words.
Thanks, Doug.
Not sure how to follow you guys up. I'm going to start with a simple thank you. Christopher, you talked about breaking the ice, and we really appreciate you helping us break the ice on today's podcast when it comes to mental health. For our listeners, with Christopher, it started with just finding someone in the phone book. For the kids out there, you can find it on the internet. I don't even know if they make phone books anymore.
I don't think so.
For Christopher, that sparked a journey, and that's how Vive came to be. And then both Christopher and Doug have discussed their journeys with us today, and I really respect that from both of you. We've covered stigma, reflection, the human connection, laying the groundwork, the let's, we, and us. I really liked that one. And the importance of your workplace environment. For our listeners and for people that you might be knowing, if you are experiencing isolation or struggles with your own mental health, we're going to be including some resources, including that EAP and more in our show notes, and really just encourage you to reach out. I'm going to wind us down with Christopher. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I want to thank you both, Kelsey and Doug, for the opportunity to share this conversation with you. Doug, I have a lot of respect for you. Just to be, being vulnerable is something that, I'm kind of used to now, but it's still special. It's a privilege when somebody could share a story or an experience, and storytelling is one of the most powerful ways that we educate each other. It's a form of connection. So I think these podcasts, this whole series is incredible. What a tool and what a gift to be able to kind of have this conversation. And, if you're listening, my company Vive has a mantra, and it's, I don't have to know you to care about you. And
wow.
So it sort of transcends all of the work that we do, all of the conversations that we have, for that individual just have their eyes up and kind of see an opportunity to intervene. I know we always worry about stepping on toes or saying the wrong thing, but boy, if you lead with good intent, 99 times out of 100, you're going to be successful in some way, and someone's going to appreciate your effort. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness later, but it's hard to do the first thing, or to say the first thing, or to share the first story. So I really commend you both, and I appreciate you having me on.
And Doug, anything from you as we wrap up?
Well, no, thanks again, Kris. Really, again, appreciate you being here and sharing your story, giving us some really great insights. And I just want to encourage, again, for the listeners, no matter what role you play in your company, whether you're a driver, manager, dispatcher, mechanic, if you are going through stuff, support one another, listen to each other, and make sure as a company that you have those resources available for your employees. Take care of them. They are, again, your number one resource. And, this industry relies on our drivers so much. And us as humans rely on the industry. And we need to be in their corner anytime we can. So this is it's been a great opportunity for these last 4 series to talk about the challenges, but also identify ways in which we can overcome them. And really been a great thing to be a part of. So thanks for that, Kelsey.
Christopher, Doug, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for going on this ride with us. Please do remember to check out the show notes. We have a lot of valuable resources for today. I personally want to thank everyone involved in putting the Road to Wellness series together. First and foremost to our guests, Justin Barber, Mark Manera, Rodolfo Yakimin, and last but not least, of course, Christopher Marks. As well to my co-host, and let's be real, the main host of this series, Doug Walton, thank you. As well as Dave Elniski, who was kind enough to participate in our fatigue management episode. This would not be possible without the folks behind the scenes here at Steering Change, our producers Robin Betts and Robert Destry. We could not do it without you. And now I'm hopeful that your warm fuzzies are charged up, as I have some important news to share from AMTA. Our annual awards nominations are now open. We all know someone in industry who makes an impact, whether it be their knowledge, their safety acumen, their dedication to commercial transportation, and more. And there's no better way of recognizing them than through an AMTA award nomination. Please see the link in the show notes. The awards this year will take place Wednesday, April 9th, as part of our 87th annual conference at the River Cree Resort and Casino. Do you have any questions or comments about the Steering Change episodes or this series? Please do reach out on our Instagram or LinkedIn and Facebook at Alberta Motor Transport Association. Stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change Podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change Podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Do you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change Podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.